But we go promote exactly the opposite there. We as Americans, we fought against segregation, but we fund the state of Israel, which implements one of the worst segregation systems that exists in our modern time nowadays. We talk about freedoms of people. We fund the state of Egypt, which does not even allow people to have freedom. Some countries in the Middle East, which are the closest allies to us, don't even have a constitution. So you can't even challenge based on anything. So when we talk to our fellow Americans, and specifically policymakers, we have to, quick question for you. Use this example. Can you name me the 3 most notorious terrorists that we remember their names, mentioned in the media all the time? Some are dead now, Zarqawi, Bin Laden, Al-Zawahiri. These are the most famous names, right? Khalid Muhammad Sheikh, maybe? You want to add that? What is the common thing among all these 4 people? Which countries do they come from? Anyone can help? Egypt for Zawahiri, Bin Laden from Saudi Arabia, Khalid Muhammad Sheikh from Pakistan, Zarqawi from any country? Jordan. What is the common thing among all these 4 countries? There are 2 common things. They're the closest allies to the US. They receive our funding. Egypt gets over $1 billion a year. Jordan gets hundreds of millions. Saudi Arabia, one of the closest allies. Pakistan. The second thing is, they all lack democracy or true democracy. There's at least human rights violations and repression in Pakistan, and the other countries, total lack of democracy. So we know that actually when we continue to support countries that engage in repression and repressive practices, what it does, it pushes people to extremism. Lack of freedoms pushes people to radicalization, extremism. Extremism leads people to desperation. Desperation leads people to hatefulness, violence, and terrorism. So it is, if we forget about the value system that drives us, and that should never be a reason or a case, but even if we're driven just by interest, self-interest, it is to our interest to make sure there are freedoms in those countries and there's democracy, because that will ease the tension that exists today. And think about the typical young Egyptian or typical young Tunisian or Algerian or Iraqi or Saudi who thinks today that the source of his misery, this young man, 20, 25-year-old person, who looks at his country's resources being stolen by corrupt governments, him being denied the right to have freedoms, his father is in prison, his brothers are abused by a regime that is supported, funded by our government. Who do you think he would hate? The oppressor or the enablers of the oppressors? Think about that, and you will understand why we have terrorism today. Of course, no one is justifying terrorism, but unless we understand what leads to terrorism, we will never be able to defeat it. And what leads to the terrorism had been a big part of it, is our foreign policy, the misguided foreign policy which has created a lot of anti-American hatred in that region. Yes, ma'am.
What is your commentary about like domestic terrorism by Muslim Americans or since like the attempt in New York the other day?
Yes.
Sorry, this will be the last question because of time constraints. Sorry.
And I will be available. If anyone has another question outside of the podium, that'll be fine. The question is, what is the answer to domestic terrorism, such as the recent one, which thank God was foiled in New York a couple of days ago. When I say domestic terrorism, by the way, I don't link it with any religion, because we have the white supremacist terrorism in the Houthis in Michigan. We have the terrorism of the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, which actually almost blew up the offices of a member of Congress and one of the mosques, King Fahd Mosque, or people who are actually part of Al-Qaeda inclined groups or inspired groups. It could be solos or people are connected, as we've said. Again, it's a result of marginalization, extremist views, unchecked. The good thing is, that is always going to be a minority, a fringe, and the Jewish community itself will never tolerate groups like JDL. The Christian community will never tolerate white supremacist KKK type. The Muslim community will not tolerate these people, but there's no way to prevent these people. There will always be people who are mentally deranged, people who are angry, sociopath, people who are angry at people, and in their mind will justify harming other people to advance their goals. What we can do is focus on actually diffusing those tensions. Not by talk, diffuse the tension that exists in Palestine by providing people their freedom and justice. Diffuse the tension that exists, the poverty that exists in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia. So the problem is real, but it needs real solutions, not just talks. It's not enough for the president to say, we want to have great relationship with the Muslim world. What the president needs to do now is take action by eliminating the reason there is this tension. This tension is not based on Muslims hating Christians or vice versa. I mean, anyone who still believes Bush's argument that they hate us because of our freedom deserves to get an award of stupidity. They don't hate us because of our freedoms, because there are reasons that created that hatred, that anger, and those reasons are true. Unfortunately, the way they're dealing with those grievances is not acceptable. We have to deal with those grievances without accepting what the terrorists are doing. And mainly, the central point for this is our misguided foreign policy, because as I said, we're driven by three things: oil, protecting Israel at all costs, even when it's abusing itself and its values, and the third one is the fear of Islam and political Islam, as is said. If anyone has any other comment or question, I'll be here, and I'll be more than glad to discuss it. Thank you again, and greet you with the greetings of Islam, the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.